We're not going to make all the SDGs by 2030, but we must now prioritize to build the bridges that will unlock the rest. And that must mean fighting hunger and poverty. That must mean providing education across the world. That must mean ensuring that we have the technical capacity to unfold the benefit of renewable energy while at the same time creating the opportunities for green investment, because foreign capital alone will only make us tenants in our own land, and therefore the domestic resource mobilization and the aggregation of capital is necessary to balance the equation so our own citizens do not become tenants in their own land. I say these things because I genuinely believe that in the same way we saw over centuries the evolution of the joint stock company, in the same way we saw over centuries the emergence of the nation state, in the same way that we recognize that this is the beginning of the end of a current world order, that we have to be prepared to recognize and to determine what are the things that are necessary to secure lives and livelihoods, people and planet, without being wed to systems that are no longer working for us and that were made in the image of people who only want to dominate and exploit. That is the spirit of Michael Manley and the word of love being practiced. I say to you today that when all of that is combined, we still have to come back home to the most basic and elemental of truths. That you and you and you and you and you and me have first always to summon the courage and to look in the mirror and to believe, as Erupts said, in our mirror image. To believe, as Marcus Garvey said, that it is critical that we emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. And we forge the strength and courage to develop the confidence, not just simply to say that no man is better than me and I am not better than any man, because our people now accept that. But coming with those rights now come responsibilities, because there is no right that can exist forever without a responsibility to tend to the things. A house, this building, you leave it unchecked and unattended for, and it starts to fall. You leave your body unattended for, it atrophies. And we as a region have a duty to have mature conversations, first to begin to understand how we can reclaim the mental landscape of our own citizens, recognizing, as I did in a CARICOM Ministers of Culture meeting as a young senator in this country 33, 34 years ago, that we will never be able to stop information from flowing in unless we close down our society. It's not practical. So that what we must do is root our people, so that when the gale force winds start to blow, the trees may bend, but they will not break. The roots are complex, and the educational system needs to be transformed to ensure, as difficult as it is, and believe you me, as I go through this process in Barbados, I know it is difficult, because nobody wants to feel as though they are on the front line of change, particularly when the change may have implications for their own household. But in the same way that a person who is a diabetic recognizes that if I don't make that decision to sacrifice a toe, I may make the foot or the leg, or worse than that, the body through sepsis, at risk. We as a region need to understand that the price of freedom is also equally the anchoring of responsibility in this Caribbean region. We continue to be confronted by problems of blacklisting, which pale into insignificance when compared to climate change, but which destroy our financial sector. The illicit flow of weapons, such that the ease with which people can go into public spaces and shoot and kill others is now regarded as just another item on the news, because we promote profit in the manufacture and trade of guns and weapons, of non-communicable diseases that strike down our people in the most insidious of ways because we allow diets that promote the prosperity of a few multinational corporations to become the norm of the day with the food that we eat and the lives that we live. And in the case within our own community, Belize and Guyana continue to face challenges to their territorial integrity. I suppose people feel that because we have talked so long about Belize and Guyana and Cuba, that we can continue to talk about climate change and these other things, and that it is okay for it to be another tick on a UN General Assembly speech. These are all threats to our stability, to the people's stability in our lands. But you know, since last we met, there are other instances and circumstances, not of our making, that may yet destabilize us. And we say it over and over, but we ask who is listening. And you know, we don't come with tales of woe only. The Caribbean has produced excellence. It really has. Nobel laureates, sportsmen who have excelled and are the best in the world of their type, artists, the best in the world of their type, leaders who have inspired previous generations and current generations. We don't come here as a proud people asking for handouts. We don't want and will not be mendicant. What we want, no, what we need is fiscal and policy space. Fiscal and policy space to achieve sustainable development, to be nimble, to adapt, and to innovate in ways that allow us to be true and faithful to the task of bringing prosperity to our people, or as in the theme of this General Assembly, to eradicate poverty, to educate our people, to include all such that there's not some outside and some inside. We want an international order equally that recognizes that there must be different policy prescriptions to suit the circumstances that we all have. And we can still be friends, small and large, north and south, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, all different races, all genders. An equitable and just international order that is truly built on the principles of justice and fairness for all and not just for some. A United Nations that recognizes that as 74 years old we must be able to have difficult conversations as mature people and solve them. Many in the developing world were persuaded or required to abandon policies that were designed for the majority of our population to be transformed. And those policies were fashioned to adopt a consensus that was settled in Washington, D.C. and named thereafter. And that ultimately, regrettably, was about the consolidation of wealth in the hands of a very few. And that's why we have seen the growing inequality that we have seen in the world over the last few decades. That is why too many people over the world have become cynical about governments and about the benefits that they can bring to them. The fueling of the greed of a few threatens to undermine what little gains we have made since independence. And we judge ourselves harshly because independence is a recent phenomenon for us. Others who have taken 150 years to get where they have gotten are still stumbling and falling. And you want to judge those who have had less than 50 or 60 years to operate in a world that has not been made in their image and that does not reflect their interests. This is the fate, my friends, of simply too many. And Mr. President, despite our small sizes, the 14 countries of the Caribbean community have been able to play leadership roles of international import. I can't stand here today without talking about St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that has become the smallest nation of the world ever to be elected to the Security Council to sit on it. We are proud of them. In addition, and I want to speak to this, because when CARICOM was confronted with the unfolding situation in Venezuela, I accompanied the then chairman of CARICOM, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, to meet in this building with the UN Secretary General in January of this year. And we met with many delegations, and some said we were wasting our time, and some said the time for talk was already over. And we said then, as we say almost 9 months later, the time for dialogue, the time for talk, my friends, can never be over in a world that wants peace and prosperity. We don't take sides, but what we know is that you cannot propel war over dialogue. The people of Venezuela must be allowed to decide their own future in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter. Principles of non-intervention, non-interference, prohibition of the threat or use of force, respect for the rule of law, human rights, and democracy. It is regrettable that other multilateral organizations have not followed their own charters. And that is what makes the actions of our Secretary General of the UN more laudable, for refusing to breach his own charter and take actions even though member states have hurled into the recognition of those unelected. Our Caribbean Sea must remain a zone of peace, and for that we shall fight. Mr. President, I speak plainly and without fear, because from independence, Barbados' foreign policy has been premised on the simple principle of friends of all, satellites of none.
Have examples of a partnership that have worked for us, not just from the spirit of Adwa and the conquest and the rise of the Pan-Africanist movement in our history, but within recent times. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it was the African Union, under the leadership then of President Ramaphosa, and with the assistance of Dr. Tedros of the WHO, that recognized that the Caribbean, which was being marginalized by denial of access to basic therapeutics, basic medical equipment, to vaccines, that we should not be left as pariahs on the global landscape, but that our brothers and sisters in Africa would bring us through the Africa Medical Supplies platform to be able to ensure that we could secure for our own people. It was with the solidarity of many of you in the Africa Union that the Bridgetown Initiative has been able to take root and to make a case for a more modern and a fairer system that allows us to be able to access finance and to be able to put in place measures that allow us to be able to pause our repayment of debt during the period of necessity for rebuilding after horrific climatic events. We have seen how partnership helps us. We do not need any more evidence. What is required of us is to lead the way to peace, to prosperity, and to justice. And the reparations which we call for the international community to be able to recognize, first and foremost, with that which we ask from each of our children: say sorry. Say sorry, and mean it. And after you say sorry, recognize that the future of the world is not possible without the stability of Africa and its diaspora. For as long as hypocrisy and double standards remain, it will be impossible to secure stability and peace in any nation across the earth. The reparations that we call for, beyond sorry, must be for fair access and development and compensation, because we each started the journey of independence with a chronic deficit. A deficit of resources, a deficit of fairness, a deficit of opportunity. And it is up to us, many of us in the second and third generation of independence, to be able to frame out fairly in a mature conversation what those reparations must look like if we are to attain justice and to inspire the young people of this world that good must always prevail over evil. But it is not only the reparations that we ask from the international community, because we ourselves must repair the damage that was foisted on us. The notion that transit visas, begging for them, must be the lot of our people in order to move across this world cannot be something that gives us satisfaction. To go east and to go west, we are first forced to go north. It is not right. And it is not beyond the heads of government and heads of state, the region, of the Caribbean community, and of the continent of Africa, to determine that we must stop talking about, but simply do what is necessary to build the air bridges and sea bridges to guarantee that we control our destiny. I ask us to reflect on this because it is this simple act, apart from our music and our culture and our food, that will guarantee that it is not simply heads of government and heads of state that will meet in Accra or Bridgetown, but it is ordinary people who will be able to trade and to move from the closest point of Dakar to the closest point of Bridgetown, to be able to open up the opportunities that technically ought to be available not just simply through the Africa Free Trade Area or the CARICOM single market and economy, but through the combined opportunities provided by both. I ask us equally to recognize that in an era where AI is threatening to redefine what humanity can do and even if we can survive, that it is not ours to be the victims once again of technology as we were with gunpowder, but it is for us to help shape the future of the world, because more often than not it is Africa and its people who have brought the humanizing forces to bear on civilization. And if we are to be the cradle of civilization, then we are to be the protectors of people and planet, of humanity, as we go forward. And some watching on may say, how? And I say, how not? How not does a continent that has 40% of the world's minerals not be in charge of helping to secure the destiny and stability of the planet? How not does the numbers of our two communities, who constitute a third of the world's states, not act in singular purpose to forge the kind of world that we want and to be able to ensure that the institutions that deny access to us, to hear our voices as reflective of the continent and of the small island developing states of the world, how do we not secure that admission, which is not only just, but a moral imperative if the world is to have stability in this 21st century? My friends, I ask you, how do we not secure this victory when 1 in every 5 and possibly 1 in every 4 persons on the planet will come from this continent and its diaspora? Those who lead today have a moral imperative, not just to our citizens in our own countries, but above all else, to unity. The spirit of Adwa demands of us that we recognize that even in the face of the greatest technology being foisted upon us, that we can rise and win if we act in unity. This has been a message not given by our generation alone, but by previous generations of African and Caribbean leaders. But we ask ourselves, why does it elude us? And the answer comes not from outside, but only from within. When I speak of the USA with affection, I do not only want to speak of that which is known in the Americas. I want to speak about that which ought to have been possible if the 1884 Berlin talks did not take place. The possibility of the United States of Africa, which is as diverse as India, which is as diverse as China in terms of ethnicity and language and religion, but which is entirely possible if we see not ourselves first, but we see the unity of ourselves together. This may be the cry of a naive and romantic daughter of Africa. But if that is the case, I prefer to die being a naive and romantic daughter of Africa than one who is cynical and one who is daunted by the actions and power of others. We know what it is to stand in unity with you to fight apartheid and to fight for the liberation of the peoples of Africa. For when President Castro stood to send people from his own country to southern Africa to free your people, it was in my own country that the planes refueled, ensuring that that battle was possible. And when 100 years ago, almost, a Barbadian man and woman left our nation and left the United States to come here, Arnold and Mignon Ford, he wrote the anthem and lyrics of the anthem of the United Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, and his wife dared to establish a co-educational school here in Ethiopia, ensuring that boys and girls could receive education in a time and at a time when war was dominating the global landscape. They chose to see light rather than darkness. I ask us today, in tangible terms, that will allow our people to travel, that will allow us to pool our investments to ensure that the people of Africa not be denied the electricity that is so necessary as a platform for participation in the new world. I ask us not only to pool that investment, but to also ensure that we pool our voices, because there is too much division in this world today. There is too much war and there is too much conflict. And we know what precipitates and causes that. If we leave Addis Ababa with the commitment that the world is not going to be safe without a prosperous and stable Africa, then we understand what is the moral imperatives we must undertake in each of our countries to secure that unity of purpose and to secure ultimately the saving of the people and planet. I ask you today to recognize that, and I thank Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for agreeing that the first in-face summit of CARICOM and the Africa Union should take place here in Addis Ababa on the 7th of September of this year of our Lord. By that simple act, we build on the inaugural summit which took place virtually in 2021. But more importantly, we seek to regularize and to establish as a permanent point of interaction the unity of which I speak and call for. And I ask you as I leave this podium to recognize that we too in the Caribbean want to see you. Indeed, in my own country in Barbados, we will celebrate the Caribbean Festival of Arts, the 15th CariFesta, from August 22nd to August 31st. And we do so not only asking for those from Cuba and Bahamas in the north, to Venezuela, to Suriname and Guyana in the south, to Belize in the west and the Eastern Caribbean to come together to express our commitment to each other creatively through food and fashion and music and dance and art and sculpture, and talk of philosophy, talk of religion, talk of who we are, talk of the future. I ask us to recognize that we celebrate this year our resilience and that we do so not only asking the people of the Caribbean to come, but the people from whom we came here in Africa, in India, in China, and the continent to which we went, in particular, in Central America and Latin America. This is our moment to show the world that we were not simply apostrophes to the history and the modern history of humanity, but that truly we are the ones who can level the playing field and to create the opportunities that will allow the world to see people, hear people, and feel people, and to value the planet and its biodiversity at the very time when it is greatest in crisis. Let us remove the scars of history and be firm craftsmen of our fate, recognizing that the only people who can stop us now are we but ourselves. We have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery and to build the future that our people want of us and to give them that pride that is theirs. And we must do so in the spirit and with the results of ADWA. Thank you.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Now, I've been talking about Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, and how bold she is, and how open and truthful she has been all this time. Now, we lack some leaders who can talk on our behalf. That the Caribbean have scarcity of good leaders. Africa has scarcity of good leaders. I talk this not because I think there are so many good leaders or there are some leaders who are good or bad, but the whole Caribbean and the whole African is full of puppets and rotten leaders. You are going to agree with me at some point that we are in this mess in Africa, that our own black brothers and sisters in the diaspora face the oppression because of bad leadership that happened some few years ago, that bad leadership that still exists in Africa and in the Caribbean, that no one has ever come out as a leader to say this thing that is happening to our own brothers in the diaspora is bad, that the systematic racism that has always been there must be stopped. They have never come out to condemn whatever is happening. Now, no one is actually talking about how oppressed our brothers and sisters have always been, those that were sold into slavery. Now, I've been always saying the same thing, and I still say it. For us to make Africa great, for us to make the black race great, for us to make humanity great, one, we need unity. Two, we need to discourage puppet behaviors, that we do not tolerate any puppet behaviors. I'm moved by this speech by Mia Motley, and I always say this. I hope she actually means and she actually does whatever she preach. I should not at one point find that she's preaching wine while drinking water, or she's preaching water while drinking wine. Now, I want us to talk about whatever is happening in the Caribbean and in Africa. Now, when we say we must make our own people great, when we say we want to liberate our motherland, and when we say we want to liberate black people from oppression, from slavery, if you ever think that slavery ended, then you are living in a very wild dream. If you think oppression has ever ended, then you still do not exist as a full and normal human being, because these are things that happen in our own eyes. These are things that have been happening, and the oppressors have never feared to do them. It's because, one, the black people are divided and are not at all united. If at all black people were united and they were speaking one language, the language of unity, to be sure and to be honest with you, we could not be having these problems that we have today. We could not still be crying out for help. I've seen presidents begging Donald Trump to actually reinstate the USAID. I've been seeing people crying in the Caribbean. I've seen people from Haiti crying that this one has been stopped. Are we going to die? I've seen people crying in Jamaica in the media that the USAID is gone. How are we going to live? How are we going to get social health care and all that stuff? And my question has always been, where do the taxes go to? Where do the taxes that the people pay to actually receive these services go to? These are questions we must ask ourselves. And if at all we want to be great, if the Caribbean want to be great the way Motley wants the Caribbean to be great and Africa to be great, we must do things different. We can't do things the same way and expect different results. This is whatever we should do. Change or perish. We only have two options, that we either change or we perish. If we don't change, then we are going to perish. So, brothers and sisters, we ought and we have the mandate, and we actually, as the black people, have the responsibility to change our fate. We have the responsibility to change the story we've been having. We have the responsibility to change things around and how they have been happening. If we continue crying out, we are going to cry out until we are dead. Our children will come inherit the same problems. They still cry out, they are dead. So the only way, they say, there is that someone who must change the story, for the story to have a different storyline. For you to have a different results, you must do things differently. We've been facing oppression. Our brothers have been facing racial segregation or systematic racism, however you want to call it. They have been facing economic segregation. They have been facing economic disparities. Who has been there to talk for them? They have been fighting their wars alone. African continent didn't help them. The few leaders who were talking on behalf of our black brothers and whatever they have been going through, they were eliminated. No one talked in Africa. When Muammar Gaddafi rose to say that Africa should unite and call back its children who are enslaved in the Western countries, he was eliminated. No African leader actually stood and said, Obama, you did bad. This was not the way. Obama, an African guy who was badly used in some way, because if actually we wanted unity, then Muammar Gaddafi was bringing unity. And I do not see at any point why the US government profiled him and actually brought chaos to Libya. And today, you go to Libya, people are crying out that the system that came in after Muammar Gaddafi was killed is actually corrupt, very, very corrupt, that the Western countries are now mining and extracting mineral resources in Libya. The people of Libya who are actually benefiting from their own resources, those that had free education, free health, the whole country were having free health, free education. People were getting jobs. People were being paid at the end of the month, the jobless people, because of the mineral resources being extracted from their country. They are no longer benefiting from the same things. The Libyan currency was one of the strongest currency. It was actually the strongest in Africa. And it had more power. It was more strong than even the dollar. Where is it today? So when Africa is rising, we've always had someone who brought this continent down. And for this case, we say we are going to support revolutionary leaders. We are going to support Pan-Africanists. We are going to support people like Motley until or unless they change. But we are going to share their content here. We are going to share their messages, and we are going to support them in whatever way. Because if we don't do this, we are still going to be in the same mess. If we don't change the way Africa is thinking and the way Africa has always been, and the way our black brothers have always been, we are going to have the same problems. So this is the time, black brothers and sisters, we should get ourselves united. We should get ourselves into one place, talk the language of unity. If we are not going to do this, if we are going to still live in the same division, expect no different results. Expect the same results: results of oppression, systematic racism, uh, economic disparities, social disparities, and every other bad thing that might come our way. So we have a chance to change, and this is the story, and we want to change the story. The story has always been about oppression. The story has always been about crying for our own human rights being violated. We are going to change the story. We are no longer going to cry out. We are going to stand and fight for our own freedom and fight for our own liberation. The liberation of black people is here. Sooner or later, we are going to have it. Thank you so much for having taken our time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. If it's your first time on this channel, this is Eli from Africa. Consider subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting on this video. I love you all.